Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we are jumping right into a seriously fascinating intersection of law, technology, and creativity. We're going to look at intellectual property and open source licensing and figure out exactly how we manage to balance digital rights in a world where data just flows freely everywhere. Okay, let's dive into this. Have you ever actually stopped to seriously think about this central paradox? Software, music, text, video, all of these digital works can be copied perfectly. And distributing them across the globe, it basically costs zero. So if sharing is essentially free, how on earth do the original creators actually get paid?
To unpack that paradox, here is our roadmap for today. First, the digital dilemma. Second, copyright and fair use. Third, Creative Commons. Fourth, open source licensing. And finally, we'll wrap up with the economic impacts.
All right, Section 1, the digital dilemma, navigating the core tension of digital works.
And this brilliantly illustrates the inherent tension we have to understand when talking about digital law. On one side of the scale, we have the economic incentive. Creators absolutely need to be rewarded for their hard work, right? And historically, that reward depends entirely on their ability to restrict copying so they can actually sell their work. But on the other side of the scale, we have the social benefit. As a society, we benefit the absolute most when knowledge, art, and tools are distributed as widely and unrestrictedly as possible. Literally every single licensing and legal framework we are about to discuss today is simply a different mechanism trying to balance this exact scale.
Moving on to Section 2, Copyright and Fair Use, the default setting.
You can basically think of copyright as the default setting for the creative world. Under U.S. law, copyright is a legal right that grants the creator exclusive rights over their work. They, and only they, get to say who can copy, distribute, modify, or perform it. But here is the absolutely crucial part. This right arises automatically the exact moment an original work is fixed in a tangible medium. What does that actually mean? It means the split second you save a text document, write code to a file, or record a sound, boom, copyright turns on. You don't even need to register it for that protection to exist. It is the immediate, automatic default.
But, those exclusive rights don't just last forever. The duration heavily depends on when and how a work was actually made. So if you're an individual author creating something today, which falls under the post-1978 rule, your work is protected for your entire life, plus another 70 years. Now, if you work for a big tech company and write software as an employee, well, that's considered a work for hire, and it's protected for 95 years from publication or 120 years from creation. And anything published before 1928, that protection has completely expired.
And when that protection finally does expire, the work enters what we call the public domain. This is a completely unrestricted space. Works here are totally 100% free to use, copy, modify, and distribute. No asking for permission and no paying any rights holder. Plus, a creator can always choose to explicitly dedicate their own work to the public domain before their copyright timer even runs out, totally bypassing the restriction from the start. Now, you might be wondering, what if a work is still copyrighted, but you want to use a tiny piece of it for an educational video or maybe a parody? Well, that is where fair use comes in. It's a limitation on absolute copyright, but, and this is a big but, it is not a free pass. Courts actually evaluate fair use by weighing 4 specific factors. Number 1, purpose and character. Is your use transformative, like a news report, or is it just a straight-up commercial copy? Number 2, nature of the original. Factual works generally get less protection than highly creative ones. Number 3, amount taken. Using a tiny fraction is obviously better than using the whole thing, unless, of course, that fraction happens to be the heart of the work. And number 4, effect on the market. Does your use reduce the market value of the original? So the crucial point here is that no single factor decides it. Courts weigh all 4 of these together as a balancing test. It's always a case-by-case evaluation.
Section 3, Creative Commons Explained, the middle ground.
Developed back in the early 2000s, Creative Commons, or CC, gives creators a standardized way to grant specific permissions in advance. It essentially tells users exactly what they can do before they even have to ask. And it's built on 4 machine-readable conditions. First up is BY, or attribution, meaning you must credit the creator. Second is SA, or share-alike, meaning if you adapt the work, you have to share your new version under that exact same license. Third is NC, or non-commercial. And fourth is ND, for no derivatives, meaning you can't distribute modified versions of it at all. Creators literally mix and match these 4 building blocks to build their own ideal license.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the exact text of the share-alike clause. Pulled straight from the CC BY-SA 4.0 license, it explicitly says that any adapter's license must have these same license elements. This is fascinating because it means openness literally propagates. It spreads like a chain reaction. If you take an open textbook licensed this way and translate it or add your own new exercises to it, your entirely new derived work absolutely must be kept open under those exact same terms. You can't just take an open work, tweak it a bit, and suddenly lock it down.
All right, Section 4, Open Source Software Licensing, the Code Ecosystem. First, let's set the baseline here. Open source software means that when you get the software, you don't just get the compiled, finished program. You also get the underlying source code, along with a license that officially permits you to inspect how it works, modify it, and redistribute it. But just like with Creative Commons, the specific rules of that redistribution can vary wildly.
Generally speaking, open source licenses fall into two main branches. First, we have permissive licenses, like the MIT or BSD licenses. These impose the absolute minimal conditions. Usually, you just have to retain the original copyright notice. That's really it. You can take this code, put it right into a proprietary closed-source commercial product, and you never actually have to share your modifications with anyone. On the other side, we have copyleft licenses like the GPL. These act just like that CC ShareAlike clause we looked at earlier. If you modify the code and distribute it, your derivative work absolutely must be released under the exact same open license.
Copyleft is a brilliant legal mechanism coined by programmer Richard Stallman. It essentially uses copyright law against itself. Instead of using copyright to enforce a restriction, it uses the heavy legal weight of copyright to enforce perpetual openness. It guarantees that the code, and any improvements made to the code by anyone else down the line, will forever remain open to the public.
To ground all this abstract legal talk into reality, let me introduce you to Tux. Created in 1996 by Larry Ewing, Tux is the official mascot for the Linux kernel. And the Linux kernel is famously licensed under GPL version 2, meaning it is the most widely deployed copyleft project in human history. Because it requires all modifications to be kept open, thousands of developers happily collaborate on it. And today, Linux runs on practically everything, literally from the Android smartphone sitting in your pocket right now to the absolute largest supercomputers in the world.
Let's move to Section 5 and see how this all builds together. Economic impacts, real-world equilibriums.
Take permissive licenses, for example. Because they impose such minimal constraints, they've allowed massive corporations to build incredibly profitable proprietary products right on top of open foundations. The commercial cloud services we all rely on every single day, like Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure, their infrastructure layers are heavily built using permissively licensed open-source components. They can take that code, optimize it perfectly for their servers, and they are under absolutely no obligation to disclose their secret source code to the public.
Copyleft licensing, on the flip side, creates a completely different economic equilibrium. If a company wants to build a product using GPL licensed software and they modify it, they are legally forced to release those modifications. This creates a really fascinating dynamic where corporate research and development is continuously fed right back into the public pool, returning those improvements straight to the community. Neither economic model is inherently superior, by the way. They just produce totally different distributions of value between the original creator, the commercial entity, and the everyday user.
All right, let's wrap this up by testing what we've learned with a real-world scenario. Imagine a student writes a song, records it, and posts it online. They never formally registered it with the government. 2 days later, someone completely copies that song to their own website without asking for permission. Does the student's copyright still apply here? Think back to the default setting rule we discussed earlier. The answer is yes, absolutely. Copyright arises automatically the moment the original work is fixed in a tangible medium, which in this case was when it was recorded. Registration is only required if they actually want to sue for specific statutory damages later on.
And finally, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought to ponder. Let's say a big software company finds a great open source library. They want to use it inside a closed proprietary commercial product, and they will never release the source code for it. Which open source license permits this behavior, permissive or copyleft? Understanding the answer to that specific question is really the key to understanding the modern digital economy. It literally determines who owns the code that runs our entire world. Thank you so much for diving into this complex web of digital rights with me today. And hey, keep questioning the systems that surround you.